Hey guys, how you guys doing? Welcome back to Sunday Matinees here, based out of Long Beach, California. Today I have a good friend of mine. I'll let you introduce yourself in a second. But I grew up on this band called Trial, and Trial was very iconic to me because I loved hardcore for the reason and emphasis of lyrics and what bands had to say. And the first time I got to see Trial was actually at the reunion show in Seattle. I believe it was 2004, five. Can't really.
2005. Yeah, 2005.
And and Greg here was able to. That show changed my life. It was the first time I ever left the state to go to a show. The first time I ever got in a car and driven outside of the state. It was an incredible moment for me. So I'll let you introduce yourself and what you do in Trial.
Sure, thanks. It's really good to see you, by the way. I don't
Sure.
think we've seen each other since we were in Mexico on tour. Is that right?
Yes, this has been the longest I think we've gone without seeing each other.
I think you're right. It's amazing. Yeah, the last time I saw you was in Mexico. So, my name's Greg, and I sing for Trial. Trial's always in a state of limbo where, maybe there'll be another show sometime, maybe not, that kind of thing. But yeah, so I I sing for the ongoing mystery that is Trial. And I also sing in a band called Between Earth and Sky and a band called Bystander, and a new project that I have going on, and we can talk about a little bit. But yeah, and then, we can talk about other things too. But it's just great to see you.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just want to actually give a shout out to you, A, not only for asking me to do this, but B, for being a good friend for all these years and for sharing wild experiences with me on tour and stuff. It's been really great.
Yeah, man. It's been cool to see. I mean, you've seen me grow as a person and as a band, and it's been cool to see you do what you do, and it's been a huge influence on me in my life personally, to be honest. Um, but I just kind of want to dive into Trial in the first. For me, it's such an iconic band. Um, how and when did Trial start?
Trial started as Headline in 1994. We were a band without a name. We came up with the name because I was doing a zine called Headline Communications, which was about political issues. And at first, we thought we'd name the band after the zine, but then we realized we didn't want it to be tied into the zine and tied into just me, but rather something new and different. So we hunted around for a name, and when we recorded our demo, which was early 1995, we came up with the name Trial, and not in a legal sense, but we thought and looked in we looked up the definition, and one of the definitions down the list of the word trial is an effort or an attempt.
Mhm.
And we thought that fit what we wanted to do, which was play fast hardcore and hardcore, and at the same time make an attempt to share political ideas or social ideas in a potent way through lyrics. So that's where it started. Was 95 really was our first show as Trial when we had our demo release show.
Yeah. So I mean, it would be safe to say that like Trial has always been somewhat of a politically driven band. I would assume so.
Yeah, definitely politically, socially driven. And, in time that shifted around. Like we included more like little elements of human psychology into the mix. Like on the album, there's songs about just despair from a psychological perspective. But yeah, definitely tied into political and social causes from the very beginning. I mean, the very first song on the demo, Turn Away, ends with the line, I won't turn away. That was the idea from the very beginning, was engagement and activism at the same time. Like we were involved with native issues and whatnot, would go not just sing about them, but would go to visit and support the Western Shoshone Nation in Nevada and get involved in their land rights struggle with the United States government. And at the time, that felt to us not groundbreaking per se, but just exactly what needed to happen in hardcore. So that's what we were trying to do. Not to set an example, but to kind of challenge ourselves to do what we thought more bands could be doing. So we wanted to start with just us first and see what happened from there.
No, yeah, I mean, and I agree. I think at the end of the day, what I loved about punk rock and hardcore is that there was a difference between uh, popular mainstream band and a hardcore band because there was this emphasis of community. There was this emphasis of like wanting some type of change or way or another. And that's the one thing that's always grounded me to saying I play in a hardcore band and not a metal band, you know? So, but like when Trial first started, when I read the lyrics of Trial, and it's very, there's a point to the lyrics, But then as far as musically, like how did you guys write songs? Like what was the structure to you guys writing Trial songs? Was it like, was it
Well,
Tim and you, or how did that structure work out?
no, that's a great question. And I mean, early on, it was, the lineup changed over time and the songwriting process was different over time. So on the demo, it was sort of a group effort. And then, the same thing was true with the Through the Darkest Days record and the Foundation record. We were kind of all writing together. And when we put out Are These Our Lives, things changed because we had 3 members leave the band.
Mm-hmm.
And that left Tim and me with ideas for songs and no band essentially, but we had this album in the works. So we basically split off, meaning Tim and I, from one another. Tim went and wrote and finalized the music for the whole record basically on his own, based on what we had up until that point. And I went off and wrote the lyrics nonstop forever and healed my voice, which at the time was having a lot of trouble. And then we got back together and Tim played for me the music that he had. And he actually didn't see the lyrics until we were in the studio. We were at a place called the Hanzik AV in Seattle, which is now defunct. But I remember I handed him the lyrics for the first time as I was getting ready to record them. And I had a lot of anticipation. I'd spent a cumulative total of 2 years writing the lyrics to the Trial album, and no one had seen them. Like my partner at the time didn't see them. I shared them with friends. I shared them with one person. I had a mentor, an academic mentor in Seattle, and he's much older than we are. And I shared them with him. He was like, these are very interesting. I was like, okay, cool. But no one in the band had seen them until Tim saw them 5 minutes before I started recording. And he's flipping through the lyrics. He's reading them. He's not saying anything. He's flipping through and flipping through. And I'm waiting for feedback. And at the end of looking at all of them, he's like, these are pretty good. And he just hands them back to me. And that's all I had to go on, was that this was pretty good. And I went in and recorded them. But the music came largely from Tim's doing. That was really his work, especially on the album.
You know, looking back on X amount of years, do you ever think Trial would have done what you guys done and had the impact it's had? Like, did you ever expect it to grow to what it is today, or is it just kind of caught you by surprise?
No. The way I worded it to Tim a year or two ago, I think, was that I will always regret that Trial didn't do more, and I will always be amazed and in awe and thankful and overwhelmed by what we did, by what we accomplished, right? Yeah. I would always, I'm always going to wonder, what would the next Trial album have been like? What would the South American, Japanese tour would have been like? What would it have been like 10 years more down the line? But then I think, that's easy to guess, right? What would have happened if the next album was like, just a disaster and everything fell apart? I would rather end on the note that we did, which is a record that I'm still happy about and still listen to, than anything else. I'm going to shut off my sound here on my laptop that's behind us because I keep hearing it ding. There we go. Perfect. Point is, I am always amazed at the fact that someone mentions Trial to me at least every week and mentions the album at least every week and has for 20 years. That doesn't make any sense to me. It's incredible. It's like the greatest honor. I mean, literally yesterday, I have hardcore kids writing me from around the world saying, hey, just listen to a Trial while I work out, or I'm going through this breakup and I'm listening to this, or what have you. It's the deepest honor, and I am constantly in awe, And then there's that little hint, which is like, what if we wrote 4 more records like that? But that's just, just ridiculous.
I mean, me as a fan, I think, it was a place and time that, probably it represented you guys, but it's also a place and time that, like, you guys, it seems to you that you guys play for a reason, and it's always been cool to see that. Like, I never know if I'm gonna see, like, every time you guys play, it's like I never know if I'm gonna see Trial again or not. Because I've asked Tim many times, like, yo, let's do a Trial. So he's like, no, I don't know, maybe. I know. So I'm like, so like, it's always like, will I ever see them again or not? But it's cool to reflect on, like, what you guys did musically, and for me, it's been awesome to see.
I'm so glad. And if it's any consolation, I get the same response from Tim whenever I've asked him. When I ask him, "Hey, what do you think? You want to play a show sometime?" Nah, maybe. We'll see. I
What's
don't know.
what's
You know,
what's the what's the
never know.
usual deciding factor for him to be like, yeah, yeah, let's play?
I honestly think, well, if you think about it, okay, so what's the last couple shows, the last few shows that happened were shows for friends to an idea or a cause, right? New Age 30, perfect example. Mike Hartsfield wanted to do a show. We've known Mike for 25 years. He asked us to play. Of course we'll play, right? So I think the idea of touring and being in a sweaty van with other people, I think makes him feel completely repulsed. But I think
I
that,
don't even want to do that. No way.
see, and the thing is, I am down to tour
I
anywhere,
know you
anytime,
are. That's the crazy part.
whether it's Trial, Bystander, Between Earth and Sky, anything, spoken word, like to the ends of the earth. And with the spoken word stuff I have, right? Literally
Yeah.
Eastern Siberia, everywhere. I mean, I last saw you on a spoken word tour across Mexico,
Yeah.
traveling by bus and sleeping in the backs of cars and whatever. I will go anywhere, anytime, no question, always.
It,
And that's just, it just, I don't know. It's an issue. I don't know what to say.
I would agree. It's definitely an issue. But what, like, because you have to admit that's crazy. Like, so, like, I've seen some of the tours you've done as like a spoken word, and I'm like, wait, Greg's where? What?
Like literally, I mean, I remember when I decided that I wanted to do this tour across Russia, spoken word. I wrote to my friends in Russia and I said, "Can we book a spoken word tour across Russia?" And my friend said, "We don't know. No one has ever done this before." And I said, "What about Henry Rollins? Has Henry Rollins ever done this before?" And they're like, "No, we don't think so." So I wrote to Rollins and I said, "Have you ever done a spoken word tour in Russia?" And he wrote back like within 15 minutes and he's like, nah, tried it, did a couple shows, working with a translator was a pain in the ass, Henry, you know? So I didn't say anything, but we started booking the spoken word tour.
Mhm.
And we booked 21 dates for me across all of Russia, across Siberia, the whole thing, 21 shows. And right before I left on tour, I wrote back to Henry Rollins and I said, "Hey, sorry, your tour didn't work out. Here's the spoken word tour that I've booked." And we had like the tour poster in Russian with all the dates on it and everything. And he never wrote back. And I love the idea of Henry Rollins and the gym shorts, like doing push-ups angry at me. I mean, that's
Yeah.
probably not the reality. Um, but I was sure not to send that email too soon because I didn't want him to jump on his personal jet or whatever and fly to Russia and do
Yeah.
50 shows in the 3 days before I arrived, so he could say he
Dude,
did it first.
just the
No,
one.
but I mean, Russia was, yeah, exactly. Russia was unbelievable. And then, and like you said, the other places is just, I've just been so fortunate as to put these things together, like with Mexico and, and Europe and everything. It's just been incredible.
I mean,
I want to do more. I have some plans
I
and
mean,
want to do
Greg,
more.
I have to ask, what is the driving force for, like, what's been your driving force for so long to still have this, like, passion for, like, not only hardcore music, but to continue doing these types of tours? Because I don't. A lot of people fantasize about touring. A lot of people fantasize about the idea of traveling. But as a musician, as a musician or spoken word, it is actually extremely difficult on your body, on your mental state. It A lot of people don't. We're not touring in planes and, like, big buses. We're touring in public transportation and, people's cars, sleeping on people's floors, et cetera, et cetera. For you, it's been so long, and you still love to do it. What is it that you still like? Why are you still doing this?
Okay, no, it's a great question, right? Because it's not just the sleeping in the cars and all that stuff. It's the little moments that make you just nutso when you're on tour. There was a night where my friend and I on the Russian tour, we're about to cross the border from Ukraine into Russia. It's 2 in the morning. We're on a train, and the train stops, and Russian guards get on to check passports. And I open my passport to my visa, my Russian visa. There's a spot that has this little section written in Russian. It's like a little square, and something's written in Russian on this passport. And it's where the picture goes. But instead, there's just this space. And I turn to my friend as the guards are walking through the train. And I'm like, dude, my visa doesn't have a picture. And my Russian friend is like, don't worry. And I'm like, no, dude, they're literally almost here. And I'm starting to get stressed. My visa doesn't have a picture. He's like, don't worry. And the guards are getting closer. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, I go to next level, absolute anxiety to the moon. And I'm like, dude, but right here. And he stops me. My friend stops me. He's like, right here in Russian, it says no photograph required. And of course, I couldn't read it, right? But it said no photograph required. And here I am about to have my head explode because I think I'm going to end up in a Russian jail for the rest of my life. It's those moments that are exhausting on tour, in addition to the hours and hours and hours you spend in the van listening to
Yeah.
Miley Cyrus, and you just start to go out of your mind. And eating just Taco Bell again and again. It's all that stuff. But that's also the fun part.
Yeah.
So what drives me toward it is that relentless sense of adventure and the relentless sense of the unknown. But more importantly, it's the listening that happens on these tours. And that's not just spoken word, but it's the band shows as well, where you get to meet people and hear what their experiences are like. And for me, touring, whether it was in Siberia, touring in, you know, Africa, whatever it's been, you talk to people and you hear about their experiences, and you realize the common threads that flow through humanity, and the common struggles and the common anxiety. And it makes the world so much, in a sense, smaller and feel more connected.
Yeah.
So there's this vitality to it that I get out of it, that it's just, I just can't get enough of it. I mean, I love all those aspects and more.
And, you know, it's crazy. I asked, you know, I asked that question in the sense that like it's also a question I should be asking myself, you know, because you know there's for the past decade or X amount of years, you know, I never toured for the the sense of wanting to be in a rock band or necessarily the love of like playing in front of people and cheering. That I've never fantasized about that. But what you know what you just mentioned is that like to experience different cultures and different places, different walks of life is one of the most surreal things I've ever done in my life. And you know, getting to tour like places like Southeast Asia, and we did a run of like, you know, from Mexico all the way to like South America, all in public transportation. And it was, you know, that's a whole movie in itself. But to experience these people that like make an effort to make these things happen. At this point, I don't have an interest to play a big festival or a big venue, but someone's like, hey, you want to play in the middle of nowhere or to these small rooms? Like, yes, I want to see what that is like. I want to feel.
Yeah.
And it's changed my perspective as a human being and in life to not only like try to be a better person, simply because I know that like, hey, whether it's here in America or South America or you know Europe, there's a huge group of like-minded people that I would always picture them as what you know movies painted them to be, but in reality they're just another version of me somewhere else, you know, and with a, you know same ideals. And it's been incredible to see that, man. And you know, when I ask you why you do it, I totally understand it, but I need someone to explain it for those who don't understand that experience, because it's to most people it sounds crazy, you know, like my mom, you know, I explained to my mom like, oh yeah, we're staying on someone's floor, like you know, it is. She's like, what, you know, but you know, diving into that, I've always wanted to understand you, you know, as to what is you know, for X amount of years, you still do a lot of humanitarian work. And I want to know about some of those. And most currently, you know, one of the things I've learned that you've been doing is, you know, Portland has been crazy from what we see, you know, in social media or news or whatever. Can you tell me like what has it been like in Portland currently? And can you tell me about this? What is it? The project that you have going on in Portland right now?
Totally. So the Portland Mutual Aid Network is the
Yeah.
project we have going on in Portland. And it started right after George Floyd's death. I spent quite a bit of this last year, even during the pandemic, living in places other than Seattle, which is strange. I traveled, in a sense, more in this last year than ever, even though I didn't really go many places. Maybe I'm the super spreader. I never thought about that until now. But I lived for about 3 months of this year in in Bellingham, Washington, and I
Mhm.
lived for 3.5 months in Portland. And the Portland stretch started right after George Floyd's death. Well, the situation at the time obviously was very intense, especially downtown near the Justice Center. There was protests every night, and books can and will be written by someone about the protests in Portland.
Yeah.
The protests were sort of split in Portland. There was these immense marches on the east side, 5, 7, 9,000 people a night, who would march through communities, shut down highways with their marches. And then downtown, there was the more confrontational protests against the police and for Black Lives Matter at the Criminal Justice Center downtown. Well, what happened over time as the protests shifted, as protests do if they're ongoing, was that the sort of character of the protests would go through different stages. Some nights were more mellow, some stretches were more mellow, then some nights or stretches were far more intense.
Mhm.
And there was a couple days worth of nights where the confrontations with the police were getting more and more intense. But I was also noticing that they were white driven, and that the activists engaging with the police were mostly white. And I contacted a friend of mine, a
If you don't
person of
mind me
color.
asking, when you say white driven, like, does that mean on like both ends or just?
No, just meaning that there was a lot of white protesters, and what struck me as a disproportionate number of white protesters fighting the police. Not to say that fighting the police is or is not, the thing to do in that moment, right? In that moment, it certainly was, at least standing up to them. But what struck me was that I didn't know where the black leadership was amidst what was supposed to be a Black Lives Matter driven protest,
Mhm.
and I started to wonder, what is my role in this as a white person? Who should I be following, listening to, paying attention to, and standing up for? And what I did is I contacted a friend of mine who's a person of color, woman who's a very dear friend, a very trusted friend here in Seattle, and an activist as well. And I asked her, I said, "What are your thoughts about this?" And I gave her my perspective on what I was seeing night after night after night. This
Mhm.
sort of almost performative element of people yelling at the cops. The cops were fighting back with tear gas and explosives, and then everyone runs away. And I was like, I'm not sure what's really going on. And what my friend told me is, I'll tell you what's really going on from my perspective. And she had teenage kids. And she said, I'm concerned that at the end of the day, when Black Lives Matter fades from the public eye, or when the protests shift and change, she said, the people who are going to feel the result of white rage are my Black kids. And she said, 2 years from now, when you get pulled over, Greg, or when your friends get pulled over, you're going to go on with your night. My kids are the ones who might get beaten up or killed by an angry white cop because of what's going on right now. And I thought, oh shit.
I've never
Okay.
thought of it like that.
Okay. Right. So that doesn't undermine the protests, but we have to engage on a personal level. And I thought to myself, okay, check yourself. Why am I here? Am I here for the glory of yelling at the cops, or am I here for the greater purpose? And I just got told what the consequences of the greater purpose in this moment might be for the people that we're here about. So my friends and I, the next night, were walking through downtown, in the aftermath of this protest, and we walked by a couple guys who were on the street, houseless guys. And I stopped and I talked to them, and the tear gassing had just happened and whatnot. And again, it was just all just the same thing yet again on a different night. And I stopped and I asked these two guys who were right in the midst of downtown. I said, "How are you guys living?" And they're like, "We're all right." They said, "We heard you get your asses kicked downtown." And I'm like, "Yeah, we're trying to get away from the cops at this point." And I said, "Do you guys want a banana and a bottle of water?" Because that's all I had with me. And they're like, "Yeah, sure, absolutely." So I gave them a banana and a bottle of water. One of my friends joked, saying, "Wow, the most revolutionary act of the night goes to the mutual aid effort of the banana and the bottle of water." And I was like, "Oh, wow, that's interesting." And a couple friends who were there with, and my friends Larissa and Dan, later on that night, were talking about that. And we're like, what if we started doing mutual aid work for the people who are getting their asses kicked every night by tear gas, who are not the cops or the protesters, but the houseless people in downtown Portland? So we decided to get 100 bananas and 100 bottles of water and made 100 sandwiches. And the next night we went out and distributed them. It was a good effort, right? That's a kind thing to do. But we started asking people, is there anything else you need? And people were saying, yeah, well, I need a toothbrush, or I need a razor, or I need some soap. So we'd start getting those things and we were packaging them together. And then people were saying, well, thanks for this package of things, but I don't really need the toothbrush, but I do need the sandwich. And I don't need the soap, but I do need the razor. So then we started thinking, okay, what's the difference between charity, handing out stuff that feels good, and mutual aid, which is responding to the needs of community? Because what my friend said about her kid requires and demands a response to her community. And what these people on the street were saying, I need this, but not this. I really need this that you don't have, but I don't need this that you have a lot of.
Mhm.
Responding to that is a mutual aid approach where you're responding to the needs of community. So over the last, it's going on, the better part of a year at this point, right? Whatever it is, 8 months or 9 months, we now have like this range of 50 or 60 products that we've acquired in bulk.
Yeah.
And we have a system of distributing them to people so that when we come upon people who are houseless in Portland, we can say, we have this whole slew of stuff from sleeping bags, tents, jackets, hats, the soap, the toothbrush, toothpaste, what have you, and food and snacks and water. What do you need? And they tell us and we get it for them. And if we don't have it, we get that for them. So we've been going out, and what started with just the three of us essentially is now this rotating group of about 20 volunteers when
Awesome.
it's not raining. And when it is raining, it's, a trimmed down group. But, we go out almost every week or every few weeks at the least in Portland, and it's pretty great. So that's the Portland Mutual Aid Network, and people can check it out. It's we're on Instagram, of course, at Portland Mutual Aid.
I mean, it's awesome to see what you're doing. It's always like, I'm always like, what's Greg up to next? But it seems like the Northwest has kind of been a hotbed for whatever extreme you would say it is, with whether it's left or right. It seems to be in a hotbed for all extremes. What is it? What is it? Do you think about the Northwest, the Pacific Northwest specifically, that makes it such an? Why is it everything? It's like, for some reason you hear there's like a bunch of Proud Boys in Portland and Seattle. What made it that those areas? Why is it prominent there? Not, I don't see them here. Like,
Yeah.
What is it that became a location and a hotbed for these types?
In a sense, both cities, like I'm thinking in terms of Seattle here and then Portland, always sort of have had this sort of right-wing undertone at times. Like, there's a skinhead problem in Seattle in the early 90s when I moved here, and before I moved here, that was problematic for years. And then Portland, the same, has always had this very intense sort of right-wing influence going on. And one of the things I think is a factor in both situations is the proximity, especially in Portland, the proximity of people who are right-wing to the city, which is sort of this breeding ground for leftists and liberals and whatnot. The proximity of geographically of the two groups being together leads to intensity, because when there's a protest, there could very easily be a counter protest from both sides. If the Proud Boys show up, or if the anarchists show up and what have you, it's very easy for the other side to be there right away, and the tension builds as a result. Yeah. I think that the Northwest is out of the way. Years and years ago was way out of the way. Mm-hmm. And I know that growing up in Connecticut, I thought of Seattle as being this, who the hell knows where that is, city. And I think Portland, that's been true as well over time. Yeah. And I think that weirdos congregate here, and weirdos from both sides of the political coin. People who wanted to get away many years ago. We're talking like way before your and my time, right? So yeah. I think that weirdos congregated here, and not all weirdos are the same. And I think that some of them, split this way and some of them split that way. But it was with this idea in mind that they were getting away in the same way that, the right wing ends up in these rural, out of the way places because they want to be away from others. And I think
Yeah,
that happened here. And then over time, it sort of through the generations became this enclave of both political sides.
yeah.
That's my best guess.
It seems like, dude, it seems like it's significantly has been growing there, and that's the scary part. Is like wait, this is like this person that's a neighbor, like he really thinks like that, It's like a lot a lot of those things are just like it's surprising. I live in Long Beach, and a couple miles down the street it's Huntington Beach, which is a polar opposite to here in Long Beach, and it's just like, dude, it's a whole nother world.
Yeah.
I have to ask what is your take on Proud Boys?
I mean, what take is there other than these are utterly ridiculous people who've gotten swept up in their own mythology? I mean, like the mythology that they are Western chauvinists, the mythology that they can somehow get away with not explicitly calling themselves Nazis when what they really are at the core is
Yeah,
these fascistic, white empowered, just I could go on with the what's the word, epithets, with the name calling, but it's really like how can they think that they can get away with that? Um, my take on them is that they've done something fascinating. They've made Nazism seem cool, right? They've made, they've just changed the outfit from brown shirts to Hawaiian shirts. They've made it seem cool. They've made it seem like it's something you want to join. If you go to the website, they make it very alluring to join in. And the human animal is a social animal. We want to be a part of things. We want to join in. We want to have a sense of collective meaning. Going back to what you and I were saying before, one of the reasons we like touring, you said it, these people are like me. They have the same ideas as me, no matter where we are in the world.
yeah,
That gives you a sense of belonging, of connectedness, of meaning outside of yourself.
yeah.
And I think that the Proud Boys have packaged that. They've packaged it very cleverly. But that said, I'm not celebrating their cause.
It's just so crazy to see something that, like, even just reading it, Western chauvinist, it's just like, if you really like, if you understand what the fucking words mean, I'm like, this just like it just sounds like a fucking douchebag, like
Right. But okay, so that said, the
like,
thing is that they're attracting the people who want to belong.
yeah,
So, for the last couple of years, I've been working on a biography on this cultural anthropologist named Ernest Becker, who wrote a book called The Denial of Death. And throughout his career, Becker was talking about, where do we get our sense of power? Where do we get our sense of meaning? And that sense of belonging is a huge part of it. That sense that there's something outside of me that I want to connect with. There's something inside of me that I want to be a part of. And then that thing infuses me with energy, infuses me with power, whether that's hardcore, whether that's spoken word shows, whether that's podcasts, or unfortunately, whether that's Proud Boys. And I don't want to say that all these things are relative, because some of the things on my list just now are great and some I want to be
but,
eradicated.
but even then, like, don't like, I would think that would be like a certain age bracket of, like, when I was younger, yeah, I loved music, I loved belonging into something. I felt like I would feel that's like a very immature stage of life that you would give a fuck to care to, like, belong in something. I'm at an age now where I don't give a fuck. I don't care. And it's very selfish, and it's okay. I'm personally okay with that. But to me, to see full grown men partake in this is just the most cowardly thing I've ever seen in my life.
It's unbelievable. It's disgusting and it's unbelievable.
And
But the psychology behind it, whether it's music or whether it's like thinking through, oh, I want to belong to this, like you do when you're a kid, or whether it's just the belonging giving you a sense of meaning, that I think that's true regardless of our age. We just start to process it differently. But in terms of the Proud Boys, the fact that people get a sense of belonging from that, from those ideas, I
it's
mean,
so
it's horrifying. It's unbelievable. Like what I can't imagine drawing my power, drawing my sense of meaning from exclusion and wanting to destroy other people. I can't imagine it. I
Yeah,
can't imagine.
it's extremely shocking, like I thought people were smarter, smarter and brighter than that. And it's, during this whole year, I'm talking to a lot of people, like a lot of friends, other parts of the world, and all they see is Trump and Proud Boys, and they're like, "What is wrong with your country?" And I'm just like, "Dude, I don't know, man. I never understood this because I grew up in Los Angeles, where it's very multicultural. There was gangs and there's violence, but that was just always very territorial. It was never like political, and it was never just because like, like, oh, I don't like this person of color, or I think of these people in a certain way. It was just a very cultural, territorial area. It was never, to me at least, it was never racist. But I think you can probably also say that once you start going to rural parts of this country, and you're like, there's whole communities that are like this. And until I toured, I was just like, this is fucking shocking. But I always assumed that people were a little bit smarter, a little bit more human than what these people portray to be. And it's fucking surreal.
So the thing is, what if, and I'm playing devil's advocate in a sense, what if they are human, right? What if our human tendency is to want to connect to something, and what they've grown up with, connected to, are these racist ideas? That's the scary part to me. Like, what if they are human and they're connecting to this stuff? Like, and I've thought, when the pandemic ends, the first thing I want to do, instead of doing spoken word tours, I want to do listening tours, where I drive into the center of the country and I listen to people about, why is it that you believe what you do? What's the history here? What's the reason behind it? What am I missing? 70 million people voted for Donald Trump.
Yeah, I know.
I do not believe that there's 70 million Nazis in the United States. I do believe that there's an undercurrent of racism in all of us across the board that we need to be constantly working on. But I don't believe there's 70 million outright racists. So in that case, what's the deal with those 70 million people? What are they all about? And in talking to people in Mexico, and talking to people in Europe and Iceland and whatnot, everyone's like, yeah, listening. Okay, I like this idea. Listening tour, hearing what people have to say.
I definitely I've definitely thought the exact same thing. Like, I want to because this election wasn't won by a landslide. There's 70 million people that, like, at face value, me as a human being, I'm like, what? Like, why would I ever vote for Trump? Even if there's anything that I agreed with him, or there's things that I agreed with, he's like, okay, he did that right. He's created such a social divide amongst Americans that there's no middle ground. And to me, I was like, dude, I'm just like, whatever I believe, whatever it's like an extreme or not, it is an uncomfortable place to be and live in America because of this fucking idiot. Fuck him. I want him out. I rather just have someone, even if it was someone that was like him and thought that like something extreme, as long as he shuts the fuck up, I'm like, okay with that.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, I mean, like, we've elected a near-death walking corpse, Joe Biden, and a cop, Kamala Harris.
Yes.
So we've got the corpse and the cop, and that's better than Trump. Like, give me the corpse and the cop, man.
Yeah, exactly. When someone's trying to be like, well, we got Biden and Kamala, I'm like, dude, I'm not that stoked about that either. But yeah, I always think about, like, dude, like, there's 70 million people. Like, I would love to please paint this picture for me and like make me understand why. And I guess the human in me would be like, I want to understand. But then the other part of me, I was like, these people are just fucking dumb.
Or like or you'd find the similarities somehow. Like, that's what I'm fascinated by. Like, what are the similarities when we find out what's going on behind what people are feeling and believing and thinking? I'm fascinated by that idea.
Yeah.
There's a podcast called It Could Happen Here that I can't recommend highly enough. I think Robert Evans did this podcast, and he was talking about gun rights during one part of the podcast. And he was talking about, when you talk about taking away people's guns, And as I'm listening, I'm like, huh, okay, I'm curious. He starts talking about how when you go to the rural right and you say you're going to take away their guns, it's not just a gun. You're taking away their history with that gun. The
Yeah.
fact that their grandmother or their grandfather raised them with it. So there's a family connection.
Yeah.
There's maybe a food, I'm vegan, but maybe there's a food connection to the fact that this was their mechanism of livelihood. So instead of taking away a weapon, you're taking away an entire family, community, cultural history. I heard that and I was like, oh my gosh, what else am I missing? Like, what else am I missing by just assuming that there's 70 million jackbooted Nazis in the United States waiting to overthrow our cities? Because there's not.
Yeah,
You know,
and dude, and it's crazy. Yeah, it's so cool. I mean, I would love to see you do that because I'm curious. I want to know because as much as I love doing like these Q&As with friends and people, peers, and people in my music community, I'm only doing this because I fucking miss you, dude. I want to see you.
I miss you.
But 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 yeah, I would love to understand what these communities and these groups of people and understand like what is it that I'm missing? You know, what is it that because even me as a human, like, you know, if you're going and talking about gun rights, I've never believed in guns. I don't like the idea of guns. You know, I've been fortunate enough to visit countries where guns are outlawed. Crime rate is extremely low because I don't in my head, there's not that fear of of owning a gun, you know, of like and me as a kid growing up, you know, you grew up in these you know, primarily Mexican communities, you know, to me as a kid or as a teenager, I was like, if you have a gun, you're a fucking coward. You know, if you have a problem here, we bang it out, we fight, throw hands. That's how we deal with it. So to me, the idea of owning a gun was just a cowardly move. But then there's also this, you know, whole nother picture of just like people don't own guns just to shoot people, you know, and I have to acknowledge that people like to hunt, people like it's a whole nother way of life that for me as a kid I didn't understand, and while I don't believe in it, I do understand it, you know, and it's a whole shit. Sorry, hold on, but yeah, it's a whole nother world that you know I don't get it, man. Like, but you know, I guess hopefully the world comes correct and you know maybe us having a new president it just calms down a little bit, you know. But you know, diving into one of your other organizations, you know, it's 100 for Haiti, right? Is that right? So
Yep.
what made you? How did you get involved in that, and what made you like spearhead that project?
Totally. So I was part of filming a documentary before the earthquake in Haiti in 2010. I was there in 2009. When the earthquake happened in 2010, some friends of mine from the Connecticut punk scene, actually, we got on a sailboat that my friends coordinated out of Miami. And I flew down to be part of that crew. And we loaded up that sailboat with, we said 10,000 pounds because that was the legal limit, but it was more like 12 or 15,000 pounds of supplies and food. And we sailed to Haiti from Miami over 8 days and nights. And we were, as far as we know, the first private relief boat to make it to the southern coast of Haiti after the earthquake. And we distributed the food and the supplies and whatnot to the people there. And I decided to stay in Haiti when the boat sailed home in order to try to find some of the people that I had met when I was part of the documentary the previous summer. So I found those people, I connected with them, I made sure people were alive and were safe. And then I went into Port-au-Prince to check out Port-au-Prince and connect with a doctor friend that I had there. And I realized that this doctor friend was giving away medicine and medical care for free to people in need in one of the poor parts of Port-au-Prince. So I thought, wow, okay, well, maybe it'd be possible to raise some money for him to continue doing that to serve his community. So I flew back to Seattle. We got evacuated technically on a C-130 cargo plane because there was a military plane because no flights. The airport had been destroyed and all flights were shut down. But when I got back to the States, I actually went to Los Angeles first, and I came up with this idea of finding 100 people or companies or organizations to donate $1,000 each because I figured we'd give $100,000 to this guy so that he could continue doing this medical food or medical distribution. Well, I started posting about it, and the first people to write about this idea were hardcore kids. They weren't companies, organizations, rich individuals. They were hardcore kids. The first kid that wrote, it was somebody who had seen me on tour, and he wrote and he said, "Hey, I live in Ukraine. Like, I don't have $1,000. I have $2. Can I donate $2?" And I thought, oh, okay, yeah, absolutely. So he donated $2. Somebody from Great Britain was like, "I've got 5 British pounds. Can I donate that?" Of course, sure. Well, little bit by little bit, we raised enough money to send money down to Haiti and then fund another boat full of supplies that was going down to Haiti. We funded a huge portion of like the rice and the supplies that were on that ship, medical supplies and whatnot. And by then it was in motion, this 100 for Haiti idea. We didn't find the 100 individuals at $1,000 each. We found a global community rooted in punk and hardcore who were willing to help other people with what they could, however they could. So what happened over time is, interestingly, I think, similar to the Portland Mutual Aid Network, in that we quickly realized that just giving people medical supplies and food wasn't the answer. It's not what they wanted. It's what we wanted to do. So in asking people, what do you need? Over the last 10 years, we've developed what is now still called 100 for Haiti, but is largely based in a mutual aid approach. We focus in the north of Haiti, and we put roofs on houses, which is and we rebuild houses, which is something that people continuously say that they want and need. And we help feed hungry kids, which they want support doing. And we work on clean water projects, because cholera is a big issue in Haiti, and clean water helps prevent cholera. And these have been the main initiatives for the last couple of years. And we have this wild idea just recently. When I was in Haiti a couple of years ago, there's a soccer field in Haiti that in Ranquite, which is an area about the size of Santa Ana. It's about 30,000 people living in this mountainous community. And their soccer field is in a state of vast disrepair. And soccer is a main way that kids have dreams and hopes and physical activity, and it builds community. And I had this idea of like, what if we could rebuild the soccer field? And I talked to the local folks, and they were like, oh, hell yeah, let's rebuild the soccer field. So I have this idea for rebuilding a soccer field, and I shot a video about it, and I've been talking to people about it and putting that in motion. Hopefully over the next year or two, we'll be able to raise the money to do that, because the Haitians are like, yes, that would bring our whole community together if we had this kick-ass soccer field. So it's all done in conjunction with Haitian people. It's not
Do you go back
Greg as the savior coming in to help. It's literally like, yeah, I go back as often as I can. I haven't been back this year. I was supposed to go back last year, but there was a very intense political situation in Haiti which preempted that. But I'm going to go back as soon as possible, as soon as COVID allows, because the Haitian people that I work for are amazing, and I really want to be able to sit with them and listen to what they need.
Dude, please take me with you someday.
That'd be awesome. I would love that. You'd be amazing. You'd be amazing to travel with. Dude, you want the craziest, most intense travel conditions ever? Come to Haiti sometime. It's gonna make the sleeping. There was one night on a trial tour where we had too many people, too few places to sleep. We could only sleep in the van, and there was not enough spaces. So I remember Brian Redmond slept on the roof of the van. We pulled into a Safeway parking lot, and I didn't know where to sleep, so I laid down in the parking space next to the van and just went to sleep in the parking space on the ground. No sleeping bag, just me just laying there on the ground. It's just so ridiculous. But Haiti will elevate that to the next level. So yeah, that's something we can consider. Sure,
we gotta do that someday. So Greg, what it's like back to back your involvement in humanitarian work. What I want to know, what is it about you that drives you to do these things? Like, was it like and this is more on a personal, I asked this question on a personal level, like, is it your upbringing? Is it you as a child that, like, what is it about you that makes you so driven to help and to give a fuck? I in layman's terms, like, what is it? Like, did something happen growing up? Is it the lack of something? Is it there's something that is in you that is driving this, and what is that?
Well, I mean, I do think that I was politicized by a class I took in high school called Native American Culture. It was taught by a guy named Paul Hadzima, and he was a Lakota man, and he infused in us amidst the lessons about Native history, a Native political consciousness, which we as white kids in Connecticut would never have gotten otherwise. And I think that that was the kind of turning point for me of realizing, oh, okay, so there's stories beyond the news, there's stories beyond what we see. And over the course of my life, it's been the stories beyond what we see which are most attractive and alluring to me. And whether that's helping with Native folks years ago in Nevada or helping in Haiti, these are the stories that I don't hear about in the news. So when I hear about these things, I'm curious again because of my upbringing and how that teacher affected me so much. But I get curious about these things, and then I want to know more, and I want to know what people need, and I want to know, how I can serve, in a way to, to put it simply. And I think that because there's so much to do, there's never a point where the world is fixed. There's never a point where I go, okay, cool, Haiti's in good shape. Now we're called 100 for Nathan, and we're just going to raise pizza money and we're going to hang out. It's never going to get to that point. There's always going to be work to do, for example, in Haiti. And as long as I keep listening, then there's opportunities to serve. And I think that I'm driven by connection, and I'm driven by the idea of expanding community in a sense. I'm not really sure, to be totally honest, other than those ideas. I just know that when I'm in Haiti and I'm trying desperately with my limited Creole and my basic rudimentary French to communicate with people, and they're laughing at me, and we're laughing together because I just meant to say, how is the water? And instead, I said, how is the cow? And they all start laughing at me, and we're all laughing. There's something about that that's just, it's magic, and it's magic for both sides of the encounter. And
Yeah.
I like the idea of being able to contribute however I can to those moments, whether it's helping in Portland, and having somebody say, I really need something to eat that's not gluten, that is
Yeah.
gluten free, and we're like, shit, we don't have that, but next week we will. And then you hand it to the person next week, and they're like, wow, you came back. And the world gets a little bit better as a result because someone came back, or it works for both ways.
Yeah.
So it's these incremental tiny steps. And I know that, like, that's almost counter to what the traditional revolutionary argument is, that we have to overthrow and we have to destroy. But these incremental steps along the way in terms of community and connection and listening and service are really appealing to me, especially as they relate to these stories beyond what we hear every day.
I know. It's like, and I understand that to like a small scale, and it's almost like the idea of like, we do this toy drive here every year. So I understand that on a small scale. And every year, like, I don't know if there's a way for me to like just not do it or not care or stop. So you become, not only physically involved, but you become emotionally involved in like there's something I can do, whether it's, you say it's not just you or I, it's a collaborative, like you collaborate with other people, and it's an effort amongst a lot of people to make something happen. But with you, it's like I'm in awe because it's you, you're constantly going, and sometimes I'm like, there's got to be this driving force, and I think, and I can say I understand to a certain extent that it's just like there's always something more you can do. There's always something, but it seems like, is this kind of like a lifelong thing for you as a human being?
Well, I think it'll continue to be, right. I also think, though, that we have to recognize that in all altruism and all kind-hearted gestures, that we get something out of that, right. I like the people I meet. I like the people I serve. I like the experience of being a part of an organization and a group that's doing something that we perceive as good. So I get something out of it too, and that's quite nice. And all of the things I'm involved in are group efforts. Portland Mutual Aid Network might have started with just three of us. 100% group effort. We couldn't do it without the group.
Yeah.
100 for Haiti, total group effort. If it wasn't for the Haitians that I work with and for, we would just be guessing, right? It's every week I have a conversation on Friday afternoon with my Haitian contact, and I listen to him. I said, what do you need? How was your week? How did things go? What can I do? And I work for him. So The hardest part is establishing those relationships over the years. But once they're in place, it's like, that's who I listen to. But let's just for 1 second think about what you do with this toy drive every year. Like you said, it's a small thing. What if it's the hugest, biggest thing for the people who get the toys? What if it's like life changing for the people who get the toys? What if the kid who gets the toy has never had a toy, and
Yeah.
because a band played or donated merch, the kid gets something like
Dude,
earth shattering, earth shattering for that kid's life trajectory, right? And in addition, since we're talking about you now, which I like, um, when I put out the word in 2013 that I wanted to try to do spoken word tours, and Bailey was booking me at the time, um, Bailey from Overcast, we put out the word about touring, and we didn't know what was going to happen. We sent out, a message, like a couple hundred promoters saying, would you be willing to book a spoken word tour? And tons wrote back and said, yes, I'll try that seemingly ridiculous thing. Who knows if it'll work? One of those people was you, who booked me repeatedly in Pomona, changed the course of my life, because if we'd sent out that email and we got no response, or people writing back LOL, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you about spoken word tours across Russia and Mexico and whatnot.
yeah,
I'd be sitting around thinking about what could have been. But you made that happen. So we can all contribute in some way. It doesn't have to be thought of as little or big, because Portland Mutual Aid Network, we hand out sleeping bags and sandwiches and other supplies.
yeah,
That's basically what we do. We're not ending houselessness. We're not solving the problem. We're working towards that in our little way, and involvement in the mutual aid community as much as we can. But the history books aren't going to say that the Portland Mutual Aid Network fixed houselessness. If we managed to, it'd be like winning the lottery. I don't know what the
yeah,
chances are of that. So
yeah, man. It's going back to the toy drive stuff. Uh, a lot of the time, it's just an action because I'm able to do a little bit, and thankfully, a lot of people can do a little bit, and we created a lot. But one of the things that always to this day fucked me up, and it's a memory that sticks to my brain, like it's fucking glue, and it's there. And I asked the kid, I was like, "Hey, like, what do you want for Christmas?" And it's fucked me up. This was 15 years ago, and the kid asked, "Is like, I want a pair of shoes and some food, some cereal." And to me, it's like that's a basic necessity that I was just like, me as a human being, I sometimes, bitch about not having this or that. And it completely changed my life. That, like, at this point, if I can do something, it's like, why not? It's that the image of that kid telling me that, I was like, this is a child, and it's absolutely crushed me to the point where, like, you know what? It's not hard to book a fucking show. It's not hard to book Greg for spoken word. It's not difficult. Just fucking do it. And I want to hear. I want to know what you have to say, because there may be some things I don't agree with, and I could be like, hey, like, why do you, like. But same thing with the children. Same thing with, it's like, dude, why not? Why not do it? And and I have to say, I learned a lot of that ethics, and that me I've learned a lot of that because of people like you, because of these DIY aesthetics and, like, hardcore, that we just did things on our own. And for you, like, yeah, I was thinking, like, let's do spoken word. I was like, this is different, but yeah, sure. And it's cool because I saw the reaction that, there's always this person that doesn't give a fuck to hear, but you always see the people that are very attentive, that, like, this phrase or sentence or whatever you may do could change this person's life.
yeah,
Like, oh, or make
absolutely.
make someone think and spark something. And that's what music has done for me. That's what trials done for me. And it's really cool to see that, man. But
I appreciate it. Well,
um
the thing is that you never know either, because at my spoken word shows, kids aren't singing along. What are they going to come up front and finger point and sing along to every word that I speak? It's not the way that it works,
yeah, yeah,
right? So, people stand and they listen, or they laugh, or they engage, but sometimes there's people just stand in the back of the room and stare at me, right? But time after time after time, across language barriers, cultural boundaries, across political borders, across geographical boundaries, the people in the back of the room who are standing like this are ones who at the end of the night will come up and be like, it's pretty cool. Hey, and then they want to talk and they want to share. And then I get a chance to listen to what their story is. You don't know why they were standing in the back of the room just staring at me. It's not, in our minds, it's easy to be like, oh, wow, they hate our band. They hate what I have to say. They don't like people with shaved heads and mustaches, whatever it is. You don't know,
Yeah.
and when people start coming out and sharing at the end of the night, that's when the real connection happens. So yeah, I mean, I appreciate it. I appreciate that very much. Like hearing your experience with that kid years ago, giving you feedback on what they need, because you never could have guessed that. You never could have guessed it. And that's where that listening comes in, or that where an expanded sense of community comes in. I love that.
Yeah, I could have just easily handed him a toy, but instead I was like, I'm gonna ask him, like, what do you want? And it changed
That's
my
the
life.
essence, man. Because like that's what we learned in Portland for sure, and even in Seattle. There's a group here called the Egg Rolls. Every Sunday we give out food at this restaurant called Chu Min. The owner of Chu Min is she makes food for 100 people. Every Sunday we hand it out to the houseless or the hungry. No questions asked. If you're hungry, you walk right up to the window. It doesn't matter where you're from, where you live, what your situation is. The houseless or hungry get fed 10:30 to 12:30 every Sunday at Chu Min. So but asking people, like, what would you like? What do you need? Where are you staying? And people will tell you what they need. They'll tell you what they're feeling. They'll tell you what they're thinking. And there's value in that listening. It's just really, it's the listening is everything. The listening is everything.
Yeah.
Which is ironic for the singer of a band, right? You know this as well. It's ironic for the singer of the band to be like, listening is everything, but it really is. It really is.
Yeah, man. Well, dude, I got a couple questions for you left, and I'll let you go. I've always wanted to ask, how'd you learn juggling? Like, what made you want to? I remember seeing a video of you in a suit just juggling, and I was like, this motherfucker knows how to juggle. How'd you learn how to juggle?
Okay, so I when I was in 6th grade, I got signed up by accident for a juggling mini course. My school had these mini courses after school, and you could learn how to play ultimate frisbee, and you could learn how to, I don't know, knit or something, or you could learn Dungeons and Dragons, or you could learn how to play baseball after school. And there was a juggling class, and I didn't want to take the juggling class. I wanted to take the coin collecting class because I've always been fascinated about coins. And we could do a whole podcast on coins. I know more about coins than I know about hardcore speaking, juggling, anything. That's
I know you do because of Bailey.
That's right. That's the untapped, unquestioned, I never really talk about it world. If you and I aren't hanging out, I'm somewhere reading about coins. So if you're wondering what I'm doing later tonight, tomorrow, or next Thursday, I'm reading about coins, auctions. It's endless. It's endless with the coins. Okay. I wanted to take this class in coin collecting. I even found and paid for the guy to teach the coin collecting class when I was in 6th grade. I found this coin dealer in the next town over, and I offered him $5 a week if he would teach a mini course on coins to me and my friends. And the school secretary, when the school secretary was signing up everyone for all the mini courses, signed some other kid up for coin collecting and signed me up for juggling, totally by mistake. I was like, what the hell? I paid for this class and I still didn't get signed up for it. So I walk into the juggling class on the first day and I'm like, this is bullshit. My life is over. I hate this. And I look up and there's this kid standing there and he's juggling 3 white baseballs. And I seriously looked up at him, and in my head I said, that's what I want to do for the rest of my life. And that was it. I was in 6th grade. So ever since then, yeah, it's been passion. And like, I've made a living at it, combining it with speaking. And it's a combination of amazing and ridiculous. And it makes me really happy. But that's how it all started.
I've seen it, and you're incredibly good at it. It's like, I was like, what?
Dude, if I tilt the camera back, you see that I live in a loft with 13-foot ceilings that I moved into so that I could juggle all the time. I didn't move in here to collect coins. I moved in here so I could juggle with tall ceilings.
So is that a requirement? Wherever you live, the requirement is that the ceilings have to be high enough for you to juggle?
Yeah, I mean, if I was living in a place with like 8-foot ceilings, what am I going to do all day long? I'm sit around and I'm going to collect coins and talk to you on Zoom. Like, I don't know. I need a place where I can throw and catch stuff. I mean, the relationship with gravity fascinates me. I mean, we could talk about the beyond just the tricks and me in a suit if I'm doing a presentation that's more commercial or whatever. Beyond that stuff, the relationship of a human being throwing and catching an object that's flying in the air, the psychology, philosophy behind that, I could talk about until every single one of your viewers dies of boredom. But I'm fascinated by it.
One of these days, you have to try to teach me because the hand-eye coordination to try to juggle has frustrated me to the point where I just fucking throw the balls.
I'm in it.
Oh,
I'm in it, man. We'll do it. Next time we're in LA or Mexico at the same time, game on. Anywhere I see you next, we'll just pick up 3 rocks if we have to, and we'll go for it.
well, before I let you go, man, is there any shout outs or anything you want to say to the world before I let you go?
Well, okay. More than anything else, thank you for taking the time, and anybody who's watching this, thank you for taking the time. Of course, I could list the stuff, right? The links and the everything, but if we meet on Instagram, there's my link trees in my Instagram bio, and it's got all the links in there. But get in touch. Like again, like it's about the listening. If people absorb this and watch this, that's one thing, but I want to hear from people. I want to hear from people about your ideas, your thoughts, anything that we talked about. If you know anything about rare coins, I want you to tell me what you know because I want to know more. It could be anything from the ideas, the politics, the activism, whatever it is. Not about the stuff that I'm doing, but the stuff that you're doing. Like I love when people get in touch and they're like, "Here's what I have going on." So at Greg Bennick on Instagram, get in touch there, and let's keep in touch and build and strengthen community through listening. I would love that.
Well, that's awesome, dude. I'm always stoked to see you. I'm always stoked to see what you're doing, what you're, the next project, and it's incredible, man. I can't wait to hang out, and if there's ever any help you need or platforms, we would always love to, you know, send the word out or whatever you have going on to help out.
I appreciate it, man.
Um,
You equally inspire me, and I'm just very happy to spend some time with you. Thanks so much, man.
you too, brother. Well, I'm gonna let you go. I'm gonna go
Sounds
hang
good.
out and go juggle your in your 10-foot ceiling room. All right, peace out, brother.
See you, buddy.